Hello and welcome to Glastonbury. Well, this is again a very special Glastonbury. I hope you brought the champagne. Pop it open because this is our 50th episode, the Big 50. And frankly, I don't know. Is the pandemic still going on? I have no idea anymore. But I'm going to keep on doing them because I'm not going out anytime soon. So you can leave your house if you want to, man. It's all up to you. But for me, I'm going to stay right in here with a Glastonbury romance. Why shouldn't the Lord have chosen me, Mr. Gourd was now saying, as he leaned forward in his wicker chair, hugging his legs and wagging his hydrocephalic head, to bring back an age of faith to our Western world. The way I am doing it will seem heresy to some, blasphemy to others, pure hocus pocus to most. But that's exactly, my dear, what all new outsports of the real presence have seemed. Do you think anyone can put a stopper on me? Matt Decker had never, since Sam's mother's death, been called my dear by any living soul. But it was such a quaint word that the man used just then, at such a moment, the word stopper, that it looked at him with something like real respect. The chap could not be a humbug. No humbug would say, put a stopper on me. Matt Decker now began scrutinizing his guest's great bowed head as Bloody Johnny grew somnolent, in the way his huge, plump, clenched fist lay on the rough little garden table by the edge of his bottle and glass. There's the head of a heretic, he thought. No doubt the great Marcion, with his skull full of spiritual errors, had a head like that. But it's all wrong. Christ has chosen to reveal himself through the tradition of his church in no other way. When the church's authority is undermined, life falls back into chaos, into the blind gropings of matter, or at least of nature. The Lord has filled me, rumbled Bloody Johnny, again in his hoarse voice, with the power of his spirit, my dear, and nothing can stop me from doing his will. I feel his will pouring through me, my dear, by night and by day. Let the glory go to him he pleases. I am but a reed, a miserable pipe, a wretched conduit, a contemptible sluice. But never mind what I am. Through me, at this moment of time, the eternal is breaking through. Yes, dear sir, for I admire ye and respect ye, it's breaking through. I'm going to make Glastonbury the center of the religion of all the West. I feel it in me, this power. I feel it, dear, dear Mr. Decker, and nothing can stop me. Nothing. He lifted his heavy fist and emptied the remainder of the bottle into his glass and tossed it, this time without any drop of water, down his capacious throat. After this, the man's chin sank down again upon his chest, and his host had time to abandon himself in peace once more to his troubled thoughts. Matt Decker, noticing at last that his guest's eyes had actually closed, brought out his great old-fashioned watch with its blue enameled back and looked at it with a puckered brow. A deep sigh came from his heart as he replaced this timepiece, for he had seen the little hand approaching 11 and the big hand approaching 10. 10 minutes to 11, and Sam not back. He must be staying with her, sleeping with her. His hands, old clumsy Sam's rough hands, the hands that had hammered together the little garden table on which the empty bottle rested, must be now caressing her naked, satiny limbs. Matt Decker's face positively contorted itself with suffering as this image as this imaginative projection of his own feeling into those of his sons went on dominating his senses. Suddenly there was a loud ring at the front door bell. Matt Decker stared up upon his feet. John Gurd jerked up his head and, pushing away the empty bottle with the back of his knuckles, gathered himself together to face whatever new incursion into the museum the sounds portended. The clatter of petty pitches, heavy shoes came echoing down the passage. Oh no, looks like I'm going to have to do some Cockney again. By the way, I'd just like to pause here for a second and say this kind of stuff with his, so he's jealous of his son having sex with somebody. It's pretty weird. And if you look up our man here, John Cowper Powys, it almost seems like, if this is autobiographical, the characters that are most like him are Matt and Sam, because his father, I think, was a preacher. So, pretty weird stuff. Anyway, let's continue. Enough rambling. Is it your son? Broke in Mr. Geard, but the priest shook his head. He'd never ring, he murmured. The door is always... His voice was lost in the noisy opening of the front door while an alarming colloquy... Colloquy? I don't know how to pronounce that. Overheard by both of the men, began to take place on the doorstep. She can't abide the pain 1 hour longer, and doctor said she couldn't have no more morphine till he come tomorrow. I've run near all the way, for I can't bear living the poor thing like as she is. She'd be crazy with pain, and that's the truth. Yeah, sorry. Matt Decker was out into the hall now, and Mr. Garrett, his deserted chair creaking like an anxious goblin, was in the museum doorway. This is Nurse Robinson. She's a niece of our Mrs. Robinson, whom I expect you know. Nancy, I call her, said Mr. Decker. And as Penny Pitches retreated down this passage to her own domain, the nurse and Mr. Garrett shook hands. The newcomer was certainly more like a Nancy than like a nurse. A red-faced, lusty creature she appeared when she threw back her hood, but her face betrayed a natural agitation at this moment that was more humane than it was professional. "But this is outrageous!" cried Mr. Decker. And with the light of the half-lamp hanging from the ceiling, Garrett could see a vein in the priest's forehead swell and swell, till it resembled a little thin snake beneath his skin. "This is unbearable! Have you called the doctor up? Have you talked to him?" I don't know what's going on. What's he so pissed about? Nurse Robinson added. "He says 'tis the law," she responded. "He says I've given it already more the laws allows. He says that the chemist gave me more for her to tell Hate tomorrow I should be held responsible if anything appeared." Oh, they might be talking about that old lady with cancer, maybe? "You must excuse me, Mr. Garrett," cried Matt Decker, snatching his coat and hat from a peg. "I'll come straight with you at the doctor's, Nancy, and stir him up. I'll take the responsibility myself. It's outrageous. It's intolerable. Penny!" The square servant advanced down the passage at her master's summons. "Don't go to bed till Mr. Sam comes in, Penny, and keep something hot up for his supper. He can't have been walking miles and miles." "He might have been walking." "We do know where he's been walking," grumbled Penny. "I'll stay up for ye, right and certain, master, but when he comes, it'll go hard, but it'll give me a piece of my mind, galloping over the girl moors, and the disturbance of our decent house, and all because of a whey-faced missy, what's another man's wife. There we go, trying a little voices here. "Hush, hush, Penny," commanded her master, nodding towards Mr. Garrett to indicate that they were not alone. "Help the gentleman into his coat, Penny, can't you? One way lies in the same directions, doesn't he, sir?" He went on. "Ready, nurse? You've got your breath again? That poor woman. Left alone in positive torture. Perhaps you prefer to walk more slowly, Mr. Garrett? But nurse and I must hurry on." Bloody Johnny proved himself able to walk quite as fast as his companions, though it is true he covered the ground in rather an eccentric manner. He walked with a sort of dot-and-go one step, and in addition to this mode of progression, he also had a kind of sailor's lurch, as if he had just landed from a rolling deck. "What doctor are you going to disturb?" he inquired breathlessly when they reached the town. "Dr. Fell, sir, Dr. Fell," replied the nurse. "Dr. Fell be a kind-hearted man, but he lives with his old sister, Miss Bibby, who be regular devil. And if we ring at doctor's door, it won't be the doctor we'll see. We'll see old Bibby, for sure, and Bibby'll knock our heads in of waking of her up. "I've had the doctor out of bed," muttered Mr. Decker grimly. "If once you get them to open the door for us, nurse." But at this point, Mr. Garrett laid his hand on the vicar's arm. "Let me go with Miss Robinson, and sit up with this woman," he said. "You can telephone to my family when you return home, so that they won't be alarmed. I can sleep wherever I want. It's a trick I possess." Matt Decker showed some impatience at this. "It isn't a question of sitting up with her, Mr. Garrett. It's a question of stopping the torture she's enduring. It's a question of giving her sleep. Morphia alone can do that." "Christ alone can do that," cried Bloody Johnny in a voice that sounded like the voice of an angry boatswain, so resonantly did it reverberate through the empty street. "Pardon me, sir," he went on. Pardon me, Miss Robinson. When I said just now that I would sit up with this woman, I meant, of course, that in the power of the blood, I would send her to sleep. Please take me there quickly, nurse. There's no reason why we should delay. Trouble, Mr. Lecker, any more this night. Only don't forget, mister, to telephone to Mrs. Gerd. Nurse Robinson looked from one to the other. They were all three now standing outside St. John's churchyard, in the obscurity of which the holy thorn was just visible in the vast bulk of the shadowy tower. But Matt Decker's face was clouded with indecision. He kept turning his head, first to the right and then to the left, under the pressure of Mr. Gerd's words, exactly as a large dog might have done under the human eye. He seemed unwilling to look at Mr. Gerd. He struck the pavement with the end of his stick once or twice, muttering, "Well, I don't know. Of my soul, I really don't know." Then, with a deeply drawn breath and a queer little fluttering movement of one of his big hands, "Come," he said, "and see what you can do. But for God's sakes, let's be quick. She may be crazy with the pain." Walking fast up George Street, they were soon at Titty Petherston's ruined Gothic cottage. Nurse Robinson opened the door and went in first. A small oil lamp was burning in the kitchen table, and a black, sooty kettle simmered feebly upon a cold stove whose fire had almost gone out. Nurse Robinson had begun to turn up the wick of the little lamp when they were startled by a moan of anguish more horribly acute than Maud Decker had ever heard in his life. Matt Decker had ever heard. He had heard Titty's groans before, under her abdominal affliction, but never a sound quite like that. The blood rushed to his face. "Damn those doctors!" he cried. Nurse Robinson glanced at Mr. Gerd to see what effect this horrible sound had upon him. She was astonished to see his face twisted in a spasm of physical pain. She was so startled by this twisted mouth of Mr. Gerd that she found herself expecting to hear from it the same cry of torment as that which they had just heard from the room above. But the spasm was over in a second of time. A second of time, okay. And she turned to the door which concealed the steps that led to her patient's bedroom. Up these steps that she now climbed, followed first by Matt Decker and then by Mr. Gerd. There was a second little oil lamp, identical with the one downstairs, upon a table by the bedside, above which the massive eaves of the roof sloped down. A gaunt woman, propped against pillows, who had pulled herself up so desperately in a sitting position that the bedclothes were clinging in a disordered mass about her knees, was leaning forward with a terribly fixed stare. She began at once to incoherent and piteous pleading. "Have you the stuff? Have you brought the stuff? Oh, for Jesus' sakes, give me the stuff. Is it there? Have you got it?" At this point she grasped and struggled for breath, clutching at her body with her fingers. Then she began again. "Give me the stuff, nurse. Give it to me quickly. If I don't have it in this moment, I shall curse them above. Oh, the stuff, the stuff. I want nothing but the stuff." Matt Decker was aware of a sleepy twittering above the gutter pipe outside the window. "Sparrows," he said to himself, "but too early for nesting, a little too early. But they must be thinking of it. They must be pairing." The oil lamp reeked vilely, and from the torturous woman's bed there emanated a sweetish, sour, very sickly smell, which made Matt Decker shudder as he stood there mute and helpless. It was as if, beyond and behind the living room, some unspeakable entity of pain writhed in the darkness, and it was from the substance of this thing, and not from any human flesh and blood, that this indomitable smell issued forth. Nurse Robinson approached the bed. "Lie down, Mrs. Petherton. It'll be better if you lie down. There, let me turn your pillows." The woman opened her mouth and drew in her lips. Her expression was that of a despairing animal who would blindly bite at the whole world. But she allowed herself in her weakness to be laid flat upon the pillow by the strong hands of the nurse. Then Mr. Decker approached the bed and, folding his great knuckles together and bowing his gray head, began praying. "In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, give unto this woman, this poor stricken servant, O God, strength to endure the grievous suffering which thou, as thy wisdom, has been pleased." He got no further, for the woman's eyes, which she had momentarily closed, opened again, and a look of renowned torment, combined with wild hatred for this priest, came into her face. Nor was this all. Unable in any other way to express the abyss of her defiance, she made the motion of spitting at the worthy man. A wretched drop of ejected saliva did not more than drip down the wrinkles of her own cheek, but Mr. Decker caught her intention and froze his heart. Well, that hits a little close to home this week, to this day. I don't know. What is it anymore? What is time? It doesn't matter. Well, happy 50th Glastonbury, and I'll see you around the bend.